Alright, so my topic that I chose was about how to stop incorrigibility in juveniles. So, you might be thinking, what is incorrigibility? Well, it's defined as, not corrigible, bad beyond correction or reform. Hopefully that's not the case when it comes to juveniles, because we don't want them to be, you know, we don't want them to be criminals, sentenced to like prison. We would hope that they're able to be reformed and become functioning members of society, but that's just one of the definitions. Usually in children, it's probably classified as unruly or uncontrollable, stuff like that. If you look under definition number 2, so these are just some of the definitions. I copied them all from the dictionary just so you would have them all, in case you can, so you can look over them and see if they're any that makes sense to you about any sort of other situations and not just juveniles. So that way you get a kind of a sense what incorrigibility is. So, methods to prevent incorrigibility. These are usually proactive methods when you're referring to children, especially young children, because hopefully a child isn't very incorrigible. They're usually just not listening to you, which is a sign of incorrigibility, but hopefully when they're a child, you can use some of these methods to prevent that later when they're more of a teenager. So these methods would be spanking, taking away their toys, timeouts, early bedtime, limiting screen time. If they have a phone, taking it away, stuff like that. All methods that can be used to prevent it or in the early years so it doesn't carry over to their later years in life. So some of the other methods for an adolescent within the home. Now, when I say within the home, this isn't referring to an adolescent that has a home, because there's another slide later on that says outside the home. Within the home means basically methods that the parents can use. Outside the home, I was referring to methods that people that aren't the parents would use. These people being law enforcement, judges, stuff like that. Correctional agents, correctional people, probation officers, stuff like that. All people that are not parents. So some of the punishments, you can kind of carry over several of the punishments from the previous slide. Some of those punishments don't work because they work better in younger kids and not early to late teenagers. So it kind of depends on the age of the juvenile, because some of these punishments just will not work at all. So you can take away the keys if the adolescent can drive, if they're 16 or older, taking away their keys. Limiting their screen time. I put it on this one again because it can kind of work for both ages, children and teenagers. Taking away their mobile devices, if they have a mobile device, taking it away. Some of these ways to prevent incorrigibility that are not specifically punishments would be avoid giving up your parental power. Make sure that you put your foot down on certain issues. Don't let the juvenile feel like they have power over you. Establishing clear boundaries, very similar to putting your foot down, drawing a line in the sand, saying, nope, we're not moving past this point. You're not getting any sort of workaround in this situation, stuff like that. Utilize assertive and effective communication. Make sure that they understand that you are in control, obviously through communication. Effective communication. Actually having an effective conversation with your child, or with, the parent needs to have an effective talk with their child. You can't just sit there and say, oh, well, I'm the boss. That's not a bad thing to say, but make sure that they, it's a two-way street, that they understand that you are the one in charge, and that you, even though they must be punished, that you still love them, and stuff like that. When dealing with a group of teens, focus on the leader. If there's several teenagers, the leader might get in trouble, it might cause the other members of said group to feel like they could get in trouble as well. It might make them feel less invincible, because let's be honest, kids and teenagers think they're invincible. In mild situations, maintain humor and show empathy. Make sure that if you're not in a situation that's, if you're not in a shouting match with someone, make sure that you maybe throw in a joke or two, or you try to go the empathy route, empathetic route. Routes that, show the juvenile that if you are their parent, that you love them, stuff like that. If they have a chance to help you fix the problem, let them fix the problem. Or at least let them help you fix the problem. If they can't help you fix it, don't let them. Because if they're unable to fix it, then they're going to be unable to fix it regardless of how hard they try. And in serious situations, deploy consequences. This would refer back to the punishments. These consequences can lower resistance and compel respect and cooperation. When I was a child, I was spanked, and it did help grow me into a respectable human being. That's not to say that if anyone doesn't spank their children, that their children are going to be completely awful. It's just that's something that worked for me. Spanking worked for my mom. She used it on me, and it worked. I would say pretty well. I don't really have any anger issues or any real problems from it, but every parent is allowed to teach their child the way they want. So these are methods for an adolescent outside the home. These methods are reactive instead of proactive, unlike the methods for a child. Like I said, outside the home just means that this is methods that are used by people that are not the child's, the juvenile's parents. So this could be if they're sentenced to probation by a judge, sentenced to time in juvenile detention facility, sentenced to community service, pay fines. If they are tried as an adult, they could be sentenced to life without parole. That is an extremely harsh punishment. Hopefully, they don't get that punishment. However, there's a saying where, it's kind of popular saying, you do the crime, you do the time. Stuff like that. Unfortunately, that's just how the justice system is. Do I agree with it completely? No. But if they are actively committing felony upon felony upon felony, then they should be tried as an adult and possibly sentenced to some prison time. Do I agree it should be life? That's up for debate, but I can see good and bad sides of sentencing someone under the age of 18 to life without parole, but I think there are there's more cons than pros in that situation. The final remarks, what I would say is, I think I mentioned it, I was spanked as a kid. It taught me discipline, and it taught me to listen to my parents. When I messed up, my parents would take my toys or video games away. Those two things, they did help, I guess, mold me to become the person I am today. I do my best to listen to people who have authority over me, stuff like that. I was raised in church, so that helped. Having Christian parents, becoming Christian myself, reading and learning from the Bible. Christianity and Christian teachings, there's many different sections on how to raise your children. There's a bunch of different books that are not the Bible that teach you how to raise your children from a biblical perspective. So there's lots of different ways you can go about that. If you aren't into spanking, and you do not want to spank your child, and you feel like spanking is completely and utterly wrong, that is okay. You have the right to train your child the way you want. Any parent has the right to train their child any way they want. While it's not specifically a right mentioned in the Constitution, I do think that if the parent wants to raise their child in a certain way, they should be able to, because they are the parent. With that being said, if you do not like spanking your child, that's fine. I do think you should have some form of harsh punishment that can deter your child or teenager, depending on their age, it can deter them from becoming a delinquent. It can make them more respectable towards other people. It can teach them discipline. Stuff like that. And the last thing that I put down is something my mom taught me when she would spank me. She would always mention, almost every time she'd spank me, that she's doing this because she loves me. And at the time I didn't understand it, but now I do. Remember, you punish to teach discipline and to train. You never punish a child to hurt. This mostly pertains to spanking because it's an act that it does hurt, but, my mom would say that she did it because she loves me. She did never want to hurt me. So yes, that is my opinion on how you stop incorrigibility, and thank you for your time.